Hey everyone, welcome to Make Bank with Mia Banks. This podcast is intended to promote conversation among females regarding finance, the stock market, investments, and more. I'm Mia Banks, and I'll be your host. Hey everyone, welcome back to Make Bank with Mia Banks. I'm super excited to introduce our guest. Joining me today is Rachel Weingeist. Let me briefly tell you a little bit about Rachel. Rachel has graduated from the University of Southern California, where her major was public relations with a business minor. Rachel's affinity towards tech started during her time at USC, where she had 6 different internships across the consumer, tech, and finance that included Kane Anderson Capital Advisors in fundraising and sales, Clinique Media working in strategic partnerships, and Chanel where she worked in operations. After Rachel graduated, she started as an analyst in Morgan Stanley's strategic client management group within the wealth management division. After a pretty rigorous interview process, Rachel had landed her current role as a tech investment banking analyst in the Morgan Stanley's Menlo Park office in California. Hey, Rachel, how are you doing today? Welcome.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So your career is off to an extremely strong start in just 3.5 years. Based on your education, internships, and career, how do you think women are doing today in the financial world?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think now more than ever, kind of what I had seen, going from high school to college and looking at internships and then finally getting a full-time offer. I think this is a really great time to be a young woman going into finance. I think there are a ton of opportunities, and I have felt that kind of the opportunities that I've received thus far have, being a woman has been, a good thing.
Amazing. So how would you say that your identity as a female has impacted your experiences in the business industry?
Sure. So I think, and if you want to look at it from like young and also being a
Right.
female, I
Yeah.
think what's really great, at least speaking from like a banking program perspective, especially if you're looking, if anyone's looking for ones at big banks in New York, I think there's a real big emphasis on diversity and inclusion right now with a lot of those firms. So I think, like to my point earlier, there are lots of opportunities for women and lots of spots for women coming out of college to get a role. So I would encourage kind of everyone, if you guys have any kind of older woman or kind of mentor type people who are older than you can kind of lend yourself advice, I would highly recommend it, because I feel like there's just a really strong community. And I think, me included, when I see, more women come into the space, I would love just kind of incubate it further. And I would just love to see more of them. So I have felt mentorship from many women above me, and have felt that kind of the internal mobility I had done through Morgan Stanley has been shepherded by that as well.
Right. So you mentioned that you had some not older, but older than you women who had helped you kind of through your journey. Was there a significance of having like a woman mentor rather than a man mentor? Like, how did that being in the same gender as someone kind of impact maybe your comfortability?
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of content of like the kind of advice they're maybe telling me, or the kind of like, experience they have from certain roles, isn't extremely different. But I would say that if you have a mentor who's also a woman and you yourself are a woman too, I think they're, I don't want to say more inclined to help you, but they definitely want to see you succeed, just to see more women in the space, as a space of finance being more traditionally male
Right.
dominated.
I mean, we all benefit together, so I think that we all kind of want to bring each other up as a community, then compete with each other.
I would love to see more women there. And I think, kind of like to your point, stronger, better together. And I don't think that anyone's like more critical of other people because of it.
Right.
So I love, like, especially now in my current role, I also run analyst recruiting. So I always try to make sure that there's a good number there too.
Okay, so you had mentioned that since a young age you've been very interested in fashion and e-commerce, but you soon realized that through your internships that you wanted a more technical skill set. Can you kind of elaborate and talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I had in school, kind of to your point earlier, I had six different internships, predominantly in kind of the fashion, kind of consumer retail space, and really loved everything about branding, and thought that I wanted to work at a brand or a designer when I graduated school. And between the summer between junior and senior year, kind of a pivotal summer where a lot of people like to get that job offer, I'd interned for a really stellar e-commerce company here in New York. Loved the experience, really thought the company was great, but just kind of realized that that wasn't really the technical experience or the training and the infrastructure from that company specifically wasn't really what I was hoping to get after school. And kind of thought both my brother and my dad are in finance. They both do private equity. My brother started out at an investment bank after school, so thought that, you know, perhaps starting at a bank in New York, so I always wanted to come here, would be kind of the way to get a technical skill set, the training that I wanted, and then when appropriate, pivot back to like a fashion brand or something fashion related, e-commerce, something like that. And so I had most of the banking programs were full by the time I was interviewing my senior year, because that interviewing really starts your sophomore or junior year of school. Found the role at Morgan Stanley, and then got my way to investment banking a couple of years later, within technology, which is directly applicable actually to what I would want to go do, which is then being at a fashion brand, doing something more tech oriented and finance oriented.
Gotcha. So your end goal is to kind of circle back to finance, or not to finance, sorry, to fashion.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Exactly. Something like consumer related, I guess, if you want to be like very broad. But yeah,
but it's great that you're using this kind of as getting this great skill set, and I bet it's going to help you a lot. So as an investment banking analyst today, can you kind of go through a day in the life or the day-to-day of your job? Because I don't think a lot of people really understand like what being an investment banking analyst entails.
Yeah, sure. So there's a bunch of different things. I would say the day is a little bit unpredictable in terms of, when work starts, when work ends. I think with, virtual kind of work from home, which we are going into the office, but kind of with that lifestyle that's happened over the last, year and a half, work is kind of ebbs and flows throughout the whole entire day until you go to bed. But you're in Excel a lot, you're in PowerPoint a lot, you're typically, like the way Morgan Stanley, our group does it, you're either on live accounts, which is a live transaction that you might be working on, and anything that isn't live, meaning you're not mandated on the transaction, it's going to be business development. And you're creating presentations. You might have a meeting with a CEO or CFO of a company, and you're kind of checking with the whole team. I would say per company, you might have a senior person, like a managing director, a vice president, an associate, and yourself kind of preparing materials for meetings. So, that's kind of what you're really doing. You're completely client facing. You're kind of putting together whatever might make sense to present to them. So you might be having management presentations, kind of going into that slideshow or that presentation could be certain charts or graphs or valuation metrics that would then require Excel. So you're really just preparing that. I would say the reality of being an analyst is you make something and it goes through tons and tons of edits, and like every person cycles through it. So you're really like fine tuning and perfecting a piece to be shown to the client at the end of the day. You're on calls with the CEOs and CFOs of certain companies, which is really cool. You get to, working hard towards those materials, but actually seeing it come to life and actually seeing the senior person on your team talk about it is really cool. So you're on calls, you're preparing materials like that. You're kind of just, although you're an analyst and you're the most junior person on the team, you really drive a lot of what's going on. And without you, a lot of things would fall apart. So even the things that might seem small are really important.
Yeah. And I mean, with that job, it takes a lot of responsibility. So you have to have confidence in yourself. How are you able to kind of build that financial confidence in your job and even in your personal life?
Yeah, no, I think with new jobs, and I find that, well, first off, internships are incredibly helpful. I think you can do really well in school, but if I were to be honest, I think also my major was not directly correlated to what I ended up doing. So I completely pivoted, but I think getting real time experience via internships I learned so much more from those than I did in school. I thought, regardless of, I don't think what I interned in was directly correlated to what I'm doing now, but just learning how to conduct yourself around adults and, maturely and, handle things appropriately. I would say real time experience helps. I would say, whenever anyone's telling you to do something, how to do something, pay attention and write it down. So as soon as you develop a fact pattern, as soon as you've seen something you've seen before, and then ultimately, I do think it's a little bit of fake it till you make it. Of course, don't fake that you know something that you don't know. Someone's going to assume you know how to do something you don't. But I think it is important to act confident even if you aren't. And then ultimately, I think confidence just comes with more experience. So I feel like it'll just come in time too.
Right. Lastly, you are involved with your firm's hiring of interns. What have you noticed about being on the other side? And are there any tips that you can share for those who are planning to interview for an internship?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch I could give, but confidence is really important. I think at the end of the day, an interview, I mean, sure, there are several things, especially with finance and especially with banking. It's a pretty traditional, rigid recruitment process. There are certain questions and certain answers you're expected to know. So besides studying and just knowing that really down pat, I think you'd be surprised how many people like aren't enthusiastic to be on the phone. It's kind of like at the end of the day, you're interviewing for this opportunity. You should be so excited about it. You should be so stoked. It's like on the phone, you should be so excited. And
Right.
so I think having passion. I mean, when I interviewed, that's I did it was a Zoom, and I you can't tell now, but I have like pretty big blue eyes, and they said they can quote unquote see the passion in my eyes after I got it, which is extremely cringy, but it works.
Yeah.
So having passion, just being really excited to be there, and just be just like really as much as you can portray, be eager to learn. You could literally answer some of these questions probably wrong, not too many, but like you get some of them wrong, and as long as you have those as a basic, you could still get the job. And at the end of the day, too, I think interviews are a little bit of an ego game. And
Mhm.
if you can appeal to the person interviewing you as like they have the best job ever and you make them feel special, then that goes a long way too. It's a little bit of a game.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that insight. I really appreciate you being here with us today. And that's kind of all we have for you today. But thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. This was awesome. And I'm happy to be helpful to anyone, and especially with, you know, it's fall now, and with kind of going more into the school year, seeing how, interview process comes along. I'm happy to be helpful to anyone who has any questions.
Thank you. I think we all really benefited from your insight today. Thank you guys so much for joining me on Make Bank with Mia Banks. I hope you guys learned something new and are inspired to go make bank. Thank you so much, and make sure to check out my website at makingbankwithmiabanks.com. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.